Hello and welcome to Other Record Labels. I'm Scott, and today we're talking about this unique concept called the unfair advantage and your record label's unfair advantage. Okay, so what is an unfair advantage for a record label? This is something unique about you as the record label owner that gives your record label, it does a few things. It utilizes something unique about your personality, about your interests, about your past experiences that helps your record label stand out. It's different than a niche. I like to think of an unfair advantage as coming before a niche. It's something that gives you a unique path to success, and it also gives you a head start on that path. Now, I'm going to give you a bunch of examples, so I know this is kind of confusing. It's kind of a heady concept, but I think you're going to find it really inspiring, and it's going to help you get focused with your record label. By the way, when I'm saying unfair, I'm not talking about like nepotism or privilege or any kind of economic advantage. Unfair is being used in a positive way here. You can change it out for like special or unique or whatever. To the folks out there who are thinking about starting a record label, by the way, if you are, download my free toolkit. You can get it right now. But your unfair advantage for you who are starting a record label should be your springboard. This should be the place you start. And if you already have a label, this is maybe where you pivot towards a more intentional path to success. Let's tackle the question, why does it matter? One of the best ways to start a business and the way to be most likely successful is to scratch your own itch. What does that mean? It means you can't just start a business because you want to. Saying I want to start a record label is like saying I want to buy medicine. Instead, starting a record label should be solving a problem. Now, a lot of people think, I see a problem, I'm going to go solve it. But what's more important and more effective is if you have a problem that you're solving your own personal problem. That's what I mean by scratching your own itch. Okay, I got 2 emails from record labels people who are thinking about starting a record label and emailed me for some advice. And these are 2 real emails. The first email was, I kid you not, it said, yo, I want to start a record label. That was it. They didn't even sign their name. The second email was from a studio owner who said, I have been producing and recording and mixing these songs for artists, and we work on these songs for 6 months, and then the artist self-releases it, and it basically just falls flat, and I'm getting sick and tired of all my hard work going down the drain. And so I want to start a record label so that I can give these releases their proper day in the sun, and I can help the artists from pre-production all the way to marketing and distribution. So here's a record label scratching its own itch, saying, I'm making this music and it's not getting released properly. I want to change that. So how do you identify your own unfair advantage? Listen very carefully to this. You can't use your unfair advantage until you name your unfair advantage. You can't use it until you name it. I'm going to give you some real life examples in a second, but I want to highlight why it's important for you to take stock of your role in this business. It's important that we focus on this cross section, this Venn diagram, if you will, of what you're passionate about, what problem you have, and what position you're in. Passion, problem, position. Now, you might be thinking, what if I don't have an unfair advantage? Maybe I don't have an unfair advantage. Well, when I give you some examples in a second, you're going to be like, oh, okay, I get it. I probably do have an unfair advantage. I'm here to argue that everyone has an unfair advantage, and maybe you just haven't discovered it yet. It's probably buried. Maybe somebody can help point it out for you. Maybe when I give you some examples, you'll be able to point it out. Maybe it'll take a couple days. You'll stumble upon it a little bit later. Like me, I ran my record label 10 or 12 years ago, and I only recently realized what my unfair advantage was. Back in the early 2000s, I had a home studio. I was one of those home studio nerds, and I was recording my own music, and I started getting together with friends, and we started a record label, and we had our own in-house studio, literally in my house. Because of this reality, we were able to eliminate those costs and that time constraint that a traditional recording studio would put on an artist or on a record label. So we were able to release music once a month. We were able to help our artists be prolific. We kept our costs down, so we were prolific and productive and profitable. This actually was my unfair advantage as a record label. I didn't realize it until just recently. Okay, let's talk about some examples of unfair advantages. I think you'll really understand this concept. The first one is probably the best example of an unfair advantage. I was talking with a record store owner. He owns a traditional brick and mortar independent record store locally. It's a small shop. It's a great shop. He was talking to me about starting a record label using the brand name of the record store and creating basically a record label arm of his record store. This is a great unfair advantage. Why? Because from an A&R perspective, he's finding out what music fans like, what indie artists are up and coming. He knows what makes a great label. He knows what type of vinyl and physical media music fans are most interested in and how much they'll pay for it. He knows a lot about manufacturing because he gets real records in the store. He deals with distributors. He knows pricing things. But most of all, he actually has customers, hundreds of customers a week walking into his doors ready to buy records. And so if he had a record label, he could be like, here's our latest release. That's an incredible example of an unfair advantage. I've also talked to people who work at vinyl pressing plants, so maybe they get a discount or they just know the ins and outs of manufacturing. I've talked to someone who does lathe cuts, and with the demand on vinyl pressing, they can start a label and physically make their own records in-house on demand. That's an incredible advantage. We also have listeners of this podcast and people in our record label community who work at Shopify, who work at Bandcamp, or they work at a bigger indie label and they're kind of moonlighting their smaller label on the side. That's an unfair advantage. I interviewed a new age record label, and the founder of that record label was just an independent artist who had gotten really successful in the relaxation and new age genre and figured out the genre and figured out the distribution models, to the point where other artists in that genre were coming to her and saying, please help me. I've talked to people who are retired from big corporate jobs and are using the retirement funds and all this corporate money they made to fund their true passion project, which is a record label. In the same way, we have people in our community who have full-time jobs that they actually love and have no interest in quitting, and they're using the money they make at that day job to fund their record label. We have lots of studio owners in our community. We have people who are obsessed with collectibles and certain types of hobbies, or who are chefs and cooks, and they're parlaying that into their record label to make that their niche, but more importantly, to make that their unfair advantage. I spoke with someone recently who had a YouTube channel with millions of followers in a completely other genre. They weren't in the music industry or the arts community at all. And they're thinking about starting a record label, and they're trying to figure out, how can I use my millions of subscribers on this channel and bring them together? So they're still trying to figure that out, but that's an unfair advantage. Again, an unfair advantage is not meant to be a bad thing. I don't say unfair in like wah. Because get this, sometimes an unfair advantage is you just leveraging a disadvantage. I was speaking with someone who struggles with mental illness, and they are creating a record label that is working with other people who suffer from mental health disorders. And that record label is now in the position to support these individuals, to foster their creativity, to help them take care of their mental health, and eventually become a leader in that space. Do you see how all-encompassing this can be? We're not talking about an unfair advantage of being rich or being connected or having a roommate who works at Spotify. This concept is really personal. It's about you. It's about what you're passionate in. The opportunity here is that an unfair advantage gives us purpose. It focuses you on what you're most passionate about, and it helps you double down on what you do best. Today, your call to action is very simple. And if you've watched all of this, you've probably been thinking in the back of your mind, what is my unfair advantage? And that might take some time to come to you, but it's there. And if you're a lucky person who knows what your unfair advantage is, you've already identified it, and you've actually been working with it and embracing that unfair advantage, then leave a comment and let me know, or you can email me or post it in our Facebook community. I really want to know how you've been celebrating and leveraging your unfair advantage as a record label. By the way, this also applies to independent artists, but we won't get into that today. We're just talking to record labels. The notes from today's episode will be in the link in the description below. And if you are starting a record label, come on over to otherrecordlabels.com, where I have tons of free resources and articles and videos and podcast episodes that will help you in your journey to start a record label. Thanks for watching.